Hello, welcome back to the Get Invested podcast. I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm Jordan, my co-host Matthias over there, and we're pumped as always to talk with you guys about 15% shenanigans and 85% solid financial, we hope, conversation and advice. All right. So today we're going to get into one of the more functional aspects of syndication. But before we do that, Dice, how's it going, man? It's been a heady time down there in Florida. I know you guys have gotten lucky, but overall.
Yeah, so definitely an active hurricane season. The Gulf is extremely warm, which just makes them all more powerful. But yeah, we've been very lucky. We didn't get anything from Helene, and Milton pretty much just bypassed us. Heard from Dad, everything's good. No, he didn't. He never lost power down near Tampa. He was on the north side, so on the south side, obviously, there's a lot more impacts from there. But interestingly enough, I didn't get any sleep, but it wasn't because of the hurricane. It was because I brought home a new puppy yesterday, and after about 1:15, she woke up, took her outside, she went potty just like she's supposed to. She did not go back to bed like she was supposed to, and had some thoughts for the next several hours. So I feel like there's a baby in the house again, because there technically is a baby in the house again.
So was it just a lot of whining or rummaging around?
Whining, crying. She's a German Shepherd, so it wasn't howling per se, but it was like the puppy version of like moaning, just very dishappy. She wanted to play, I think, after she had her little puppy nap and was ready to go. I was not.
Yeah. And where's she? Where's her bed at right now? Are you going to have her sleep out in the living room, or is she sleeping with you guys in the bedroom?
We have her in the bedroom initially, just to make her feel like we're there with her. But obviously, we're doing the kennel training to keep her from running all over the house in the middle of the night. She'll do that when she gets bigger. We're fine with her sleeping wherever, but we're kennel training while she's a puppy, and also trying to make sure that she didn't wake up the boys. They got their sound machine in their room, but I think he still heard her a little bit last night. Ethan did.
Yeah, too bad that Ethan's not a little bit older, because then you could just be like, Ethan, get up and go hang out with the puppy. You don't know this, but this is what you used to do to us. So now we're doing it to you. So get out there and hang out with Bailey. But at 6, I don't think he can really. That's probably not the best developmental approach. Yeah.
I live for the day that I can say, hey, you're letting the dog out first thing in the morning, not me. That's exactly gonna be glorious.
Right. Yeah, that and go get me the groceries. I mean, I know, my family was always pretty strict. I didn't get my license right away, but Rachel's always telling me that she, her parents were the exact opposite. It's like, soon as she got her license, they're like, yes, here's a list of errands. And she was like a 16-year-old. So she was like, heck yeah, I'm free, bruh. Just like loving it, driving around, feeling so big and bad. And now, like, it's just, you look at that list of errands as an adult, you're like, F my life.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, I mean, that was definitely what happened with us, with all my siblings. It was like, all right, finally somebody else in the house who can help take these gazillion kids all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that was one of the best perks of being a high school teacher, is the teenagers wanted to do like whatever. They would you could ask them to do anything. They'd be like, sure. And like, they would just like, because it's just so much energy. They're like, I'll go run, do it. And I'm like, thumbs up.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you get after it. Well, speaking of hurricanes, my parents are actually here right now, just enjoying modern amenities. Yeah. They probably will have power back at their house maybe in the next week. I mean, they're on the side of a mountain, so it's a little bit more complicated, but they won't have water for a while. I mean, I saw where the mudslide took out like their neighborhoods, basically where the water has stopped flowing. I mean, that area looked post-apocalyptic, like, you're climbing over things like you're playing The Last of Us or some zombie apocalypse game where like it's, there's been no modern development in like 30 years. So yeah, they're just enjoying air conditioning, and I'm assuming they're going to take showers. Actually, they can take cold showers at home, but maybe like that's me they're dumping water over, like they fill up water and then just like pour it on each other's heads from over the, so it's still pretty bad up there. I know. So Milton ended up going a little bit more south than they thought, I think. So that's one of the things.
Just kind of kept veering off to the south and east more.
Yeah.
Instead
it's
of
already
trucking
out in the Atlantic now.
Yeah, it's gone. I
Yeah.
mean, it's always nice when as much rain as that one had. It's nice that it moved quickly because, man, you just when they park and just dump rain, that's when that's when it really causes the worst of the problems.
Yeah. I mean, it's damage to. It's not even. What's been interesting dealing with this because this is the first time I guess since Fran, and Fran wasn't terrible for Fayetteville, but I mean, it's
Mhm.
just a whole new thing for us from the mountains. What I was not ready for with the flooding is just the sheer amount of mud and dirt that like a river flooding brings you and then
Mhm.
leaves with you. Like that's, I mean, outside all the water damage, of course, it's just like there's a parking lot in like an Ingles parking lot right on the road from where I grew up. I kid you not,
Yeah.
I saw a bobcat out there pushing. There must have been 3 feet, 2 to 3 feet of mud just in like a
Wow.
parking lot the size of a couple football fields. Yeah, it was crazy. So I mean, trees down. It made it very clear that we should be burying our power lines.
Hmm.
But the mud was the thing that really took me the most by surprise, I think. But yeah, did you see the clip of the Tropicana Stadium
Yeah.
like
Yeah. It was just
roof
blowing
blowing off?
off.
Yeah,
Yeah. The fabric roof. I mean, all in all, it's probably not as much damage as if it was like when the Superdome in New Orleans went up.
yeah,
When that one was damaged, I think that was a lot more because I think it's just a different type of fabric that they covered it with. That like fiberglass, flexible stuff. But it was crazy to see, and
uh,
then you could like look down in on it and like see the whole field. That's wild.
yeah. I mean, they've been trying to get a new one built for a while anyway, so maybe they'll just
Yeah.
take
Yeah, I
advantage
don't
of
know if
this.
this
I don't
was in
know.
the plans. Somebody ordered up a
Yeah, but I
hurricane.
mean, yeah, I mean, we've been there, so we know that's on a little strip of land in Clearwater. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing protecting that. Yeah. Well, I mean, as much as as obviously the topic at hand right now because hurricanes have just been battering the southeast United States and it's been a big news story. It actually is a perfect segue into what we're talking about today because our conversation today is about property management and the kind of in a bigger overall view of like the layers of how property management fits into a syndication investment of an apartment complex. And of course, one of the things that can be damaged in a hurricane, of course, is apartment buildings. I'm sure some in Tampa got damaged, and I'm sure some in Atlanta got damaged. And we were actually, I mean, a deal that we were working on got slowed up for that same reason because you gotta. Nobody tells
Yeah,
nature what to do except physics. So
for sure.
yeah, so we're gonna get into kind of just what it looks like, how it slots in, the different layers, and teaser for later. Hopefully, we're gonna actually have someone who does this job for us come on and educate us a little bit more. Well, I guess me a
Sure.
little bit more, I suppose. But all right, so Matthias, let's just get it started. Like, I think we got a nice chronological approach here.
Yeah, yeah.
What it is, what it means before a buy, and what it means after and in the investment period.
Yeah, well, I'd say to start off, I'd say one of the most valuable and most important members of the an investment team is the property manager because basically you can't do anything and we'll get into it, but you can't do anything until if without somebody who's there to run your plan for you on the ground of the property. For the type of investment we do, we hire professional property managers that we kind of vet and work with and build it, add to our team that way because it's just not feasible to, for me to be the property manager. Self-managing is a great way to not realize the value in the property, as I have discovered through all the acquisitions that we do and what we've looked at. We know that if you're doing it yourself, all by yourself, typically you're leaving a whole lot of operational excellence on the table. But anyway, yeah. So I think the biggest part, like when I look at an investment, let's say, okay, a broker brings me a property, and he goes, hey, here's a property in this area that I've identified as my target market, and he sends it to me. One of the first things I do is I'll, after a brief like looking at the price, hey, does this make sense according to what things are going for in the area? I'll go talk to my property manager in that area about that particular property. We'll dig into some pictures because basically what we're going to do is before I even buy a property and install them, they're going to help me underwrite. They're going to help me look at it and make sure that as I'm coming up with assumptions on, hey, where can I get rents to, and what do I need to do to the property to get rents up to here? What will the market support? how is that location in the submarket, the neighborhood, all that kind of thing. That's one of the greatest advantages of having a built out property management team in a target market that it'll provide you, is that it takes out a lot of that guesswork and a lot of that risk of misidentifying some property, if that makes sense.
Well, misidentifying, can you talk a little bit about how
Yeah, so
different
like
ways in
basically,
which you could misidentify? I mean, this is
yeah,
not you
me
going
coming
to the
up
wrong
with
property.
bad assumptions. Yeah. Basically, it's like me saying, "Hey, I think this property has value because of X, Y, Z." If I bounce that off of the experienced property management team in that area, they're going to be able to look at X, Y, Z and go, "Actually, Y is not correct, or it is correct, or whatever." They're going to be able to kind of back up my numbers that I'm going to underwrite into my, my all my big spreadsheets as we're trying to figure out what kind of returns we can get, how much capital it's going to take, etc. So that's really the market knowledge is what they bring to the underwriting process before we even make an offer on a property. Oftentimes,
Yeah, and so I mean, on that note, I think there's two things there that I understand that I think I'm right on, that I want to make sure so that everyone
sure.
listening is also on the same page. First, there's just a very strict logistical geographical benefit, right? Which is,
Oh,
if we're
sure.
investing in different places around the country and we find one that is in some part of the country where we have a team and you don't live, obviously the
Yeah.
internet can only take you so far. You have to go actually see the property. So, so the IRL there, right? You got to go actually see it. And that's the first, they're the scouts, the
Yeah.
vanguard
So,
force, if you will.
which in a way makes it important that you identify, and with my particular strategy, it makes it, and we talked about a couple episodes ago with Vivek. He has a lot of backshop team that'll help him dig in and manage performance on a lot of properties. So it's less necessary for him to have an expert in an individual market. Whereas for our strategy and how we work, it's integral. Like I don't really invest in markets where I don't have a built out team. So the priority one is building out a team in a market for, like, we're exactly what we're talking about now, is the to guarantee, not guarantee, but to maximize the accuracy of our underwriting.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too much in the weeds in the Vivek thing. I thought a lot of that was in-house assessment from afar, but he also
Sure.
doesn't worry about building out a market the same way you do, right? It's all about the deal, not the market. The other thing I was thinking is that one thing I think we need to make sure right up front, or pseudo up front, I suppose, is that when we say property management team, for anybody who has rented, which is probably most people at this point, has rented at some point or another, we're not talking about the person you go talk to in the office necessarily. That's not
Well, it could be, but
that's
yes,
very
good point.
important. It could be, but when we're talking about a team, we're talking about a team that kind of oversees the properties, including the people on the ground, who are also very important, but that's just not, there's a layer to it. Go ahead and just break that down a little bit for them. Say like how it is in Hattiesburg and etc.
Yeah. So, for instance, SVN, who does our management in Hattiesburg, and will manage all our stuff in Southern Mississippi. Basically, you got Heather, who runs the company's property management division. She's the most knowledgeable. Knows has lived in the area basically her whole life. Knows everybody. She doesn't get into the weeds on individual properties too much. Basically, only in the beginning to kind of get them established. But so she's the one I go to when I'm looking at a new property. I say, "Hey, Heather," because she's the overseer of all the all the properties that they have their own individual managers. So we also work with a specific manager that manages Heritage Cove in Hattiesburg. And he's the one I have the weekly calls with, sends me emails, asks me questions. Does this approve for a new air conditioning, whatever, all that kind of stuff. The individual, minutia that goes along with managing a property. But then and they're really good, and those are the people that you talk to, that you would walk into the office if it's a big enough property to support having an office. That's who you would talk to, is that low level. I don't want to say low level, but that individual property manager whose sole job is your property and managing it, leasing, all those different things. Uh, but if you're underwriting a market, perhaps you'd want to go somebody who's a little bit more experienced in the management side, but also has all the contacts from all the other owners in the area, all the lenders, insurance, blah blah blah, associated with managing the property. So she's Heather, for instance, is the go-to whenever. Like I talk to the owner of the company regularly, and he just says whatever Heather says. That's what Chamberlain says. So because she is the expert, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, right. So Heather's job is to have a more comprehensive kind of outlook than someone who's, I mean, their job is to be on the ground, making sure like, that AC unit gets put in correctly. People are paid, right. People pay rents. Like that's the day-to-day functioning of a single property. It's called a property manager, but then there's a property management team in a market. And that's kind of more, we're kind of going to be bouncing back and forth between the two. Because I mean, it's my understanding, like Heather and company, or they're the ones who like, if I go to Heritage Cove and want to try to like look up Heritage Cove to rent an apartment, and there's pretty pictures and a nice interactive map to look at it, that's going to be something that the property management team rather than the property manager has done.
Yeah, like the individual property manager would be responsible for making sure there is pictures and making sure they're submitted to the correct apartments.com, rent.com, whatever, making sure they're going out to wherever the marketing websites that we use. But overall, Heather would be the one that oversees that for all the properties and make sure that it is occurring up to their company standards as a property manager company.
So I mean, so we're talking on the forefront right now. They go out, they look at a thing, they're going to help you underwrite. They're going to know the market enough to help you project numbers of where rent can go, which obviously bringing rent to market rate is a big part of how we make money on an investment. So that's very important. But so after underwriting, I mean, is that all that they're going to be helping you with as far as before? Like, I mean, what are they doing with the due diligence? What's the next step?
Yeah, there? That's kind of, so let's say that we find a property, somebody sends it to us, we find it, whatever. We underwrite it. So we go, hey, if we get it for this price, we think we'll get X amount of returns, which are above our thresholds for when we pull the trigger. So we're ready to make an offer. We make an offer. We've bounced all of our projections of what the rents will go to. Like you said, we've already bounced that off of the management team. They agree. Typically we'll agree, and then we'll back our numbers off even more just to kind of give ourselves even more padding on the conservative side. But anyway, so after that, then we pull the trigger, we make an offer, we get under contract. Now we got to go through and look at the property and make sure that all the assumptions that we made in underwriting are correct, or adjust our numbers so that we are reflecting the actual reality, the IRL, if you will, on the ground at the property. So Heather and her team are extremely useful in that aspect, because there's something called property manager. We were talking about it the other day, Heather and I. Basically, she sees things that I would just never notice, and she sees them immediately whenever she walks in. She says it's a blessing and a curse, because I think whenever she walks into a room, she notices the same thing, regardless of whether she's doing an inspection or not. But basically, it's there's little things like, hey, they know if little telltale signs of a leak, or hey, these design flaws. If a bunch of units are having the same problem, she notices it. She's good at diagnosing it. Kind of like the property inspector will go through, he knocks on walls and crawls under stuff and is looking around, making sure there's no evidence of termites or other damage or whatever. So basically, she's the same with a little bit more of a tenant facing. So, hey, tenants notice this. Tenants don't like this. We could, and then she's also integral. The manager's, good at telling us, hey, this flooring is up to what we would expect, or it is not. We are going to have to, in order to get to whatever our assumptions were made in underwriting, we're going to have to improve this floor. We're going to have to improve those countertops. These fixtures are too dated. Or, hey, these are nice. These are new. We like these. Tenants like these, etc. Kind of, it's great to have the expert eye with you as you're walking through each unit when you're doing inspections on a property, to kind of know exactly where you're starting off whenever you close on the property. You're for sure your jump off point, which just makes it that much easier to get to where you want to end up.
Right. So they gotta, I mean, they're just, so Heather has, I mean, this is something that I think it just depends on what arena you're in, right? It's like the burden of knowledge and critical lens, right? And if in her element, she's all gonna see it. But, for everybody who has it's like, I'm assuming it's like if you're a medical doctor and someone, it has some
Yeah,
telltale
sure.
sign of something. You're like, should I go over to this stranger and tell them that I think they have a serious medical condition, or should I just let them figure it out?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it's always, of course, just like the ways in which people communicate. I notice all the problems immediately, but I don't want to be a grammar police or anything, or the rhetoric police, as it were. So try to keep that to myself. But yeah, it's funny that she has to design, like, she's combining like a little fashion, interior design knowledge with, with like
sure.
construction knowledge, with interpersonal knowledge. Yeah. So would I be correct to assume that the biggest pet peeve of tenants and or the biggest benefit they see is if they just stuff gets fixed fast or does not get fixed fast? Is that number one?
I think it's huge. Yeah, I think it's probably number one. Other than rent, I mean, obviously,
Sure.
cost. Everybody's price, conscious. So price is probably the first thing you notice. But then operating friendliness of staff and speed of maintenance.
Right.
Hey, I've got a leaky faucet. Hey, I've got my fan's not working. Whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you want to feel like you're getting a good bargain for your money, but so after that, and it's so frustrating because if you're renting, if you fix it or try to fix it and you mess it up, then you put yourself in even a worse situation.
Yeah.
So you got to rely on that. So I would imagine, So that's why property management I'm interested in the fact that how much they play a part before the purchase, because I think a lot of us could kind of just in our minds think about all the ways in which it's so important on the other side, at least on tenant experience, because I'm sure, so many of us have had experiences whether it's either good or bad or neutral and etc. I wish personally my HOA would have hired landscapers that weren't so punctual and scheduled.
Yeah.
Every Monday morning at 8 a.m., they are mowing and blowing off the sidewalks. And I'm like, it's so early. Just one time, could you do this on Tuesday afternoon? Just once.
Oh, you so don't have kids. 8 a.m. early.
That's
hilarious.
I'm awake. It's just that I'm awake. I'm just not in the mood to hear loud noises for the next 2 hours. But anywho, the last thing I'll say on this, well, not the last thing, because we're going to move to the other side of it, right? But I mean, I do want to, just for a second, I want to kind of, I'm always interested in the renovation side of it. But, actually, you know what? I'm going to push it off. Something that I would want to talk about, I want to wait until we're on the other side, on the operations side. So let me just ask, what is something that you've learned, like you've been surprised by when working with, say, Heather? We're using Heather as an example. And by the way, that's who we hope comes on and talks to us, especially since we've dropped her name like 30 times now. Hey, Heather. Like, what is the thing that is there something that always catches you off guard, something you never think to look for, even though like she's pointed out to you a bunch of times? Or is there, in any of these moments, you're always like, oh, right, that thing, or like just something that blew your mind, like the first couple of times you guys looked at a property where she was like, well, actually, and then pointed out something?
Yeah,
just out of curiosity.
It usually has to do with deferred maintenance. She's really good at picking out maintenance that should have been done, and basically she notices the effects of something that should have been done a long time ago, symptoms as it were, and knows what causes them immediately. That's something that I don't have that ability. So it's like an inspector can walk in and be like, hey, look at something on the ground and be like, that's because this flashing is incorrect and it's draining down the downspout wrong and causing erosion or whatever. Whereas you and I would just look, hey, that's a weird pile of stuff, or something like that. So she's really good at, hey, this is evidence of that has been going wrong for a while. That wasn't installed properly. So, there's, a lot of times it's on the exterior. Just look at it like, gutters or something like that. Or even in the back, like, there's some properties we have the septic tanks, and she's really good at knowing, hey, I bet they have issues with this just because of these issues before and knows what causes them and what the symptoms look like of that particular problem. So she's really good at identifying that kind of stuff, which is awesome because that's hidden expenses. Like if it's just me walking around, which I would never do because I don't pretend to be good enough at inspections. I miss something and then we buy the property. Now that's an added expense that I did not account for when we were coming up with all our projections. So
right.
Hidden expenses that we didn't know about. That's just numbers off of the return right there.
Oh yeah, I mean that's so key that it's not like, I mean, you can see if a gutter's falling down or the flashing is missing, but like, oh, they didn't install this correctly, the caulk's not keeping water from dripping out, and now it's like a long-term, I mean, to use a pun, trickle down problem.
Yeah, like second and third order effects, and she knows what those are and what the causes are. Yeah. She's very good at that.
That's excellent. Have you and Heather ever had serious disagreements on interior design choices, say like countertops or cabinets?
Absolutely not,
or floors,
because there's
she tells you
no
what to do?
scenario where I would have a strong opinion about what the interior should look like. I rely on before, in our local stuff, it's all Jennifer. She's picking. My wife is picking all the color, the whatever gray we're going with or whatever the countertop. Oh, that's too busy. We don't want this one. We want this, whatever. And Heather's the same. And in anything Mississippi, I don't pretend to have an opinion other than I want something that tenants will appreciate and that will look clean for a long time, a little bit durable. She knows all that. And I just say, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Gotcha. I've noticed that that ash color, like the LPV, that's like that ashwood color. It's like almost like a gray. That is, I feel like that's very popular, but it's not going to age as well as like the standard ones. That's just interior decorating corner of the podcast. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I had that for a few years. I liked it, but I just don't know. I'm suspect. Let's just put it that way.
It goes really well with like the white. Everybody's doing white kitchens a lot, and I think it goes really well with that. So it's popular.
Yeah. Well, and it also looks awesome when you have a lot of natural light. It bounces the light off. Whereas like, my house now, like it has a lot of light, but I have gorgeous real hardwood. It's amazing. I love it, but it does soak up some of the light for sure. I'll save my rant for carpet on the stairs only for another day. Hey everybody, I'm breaking in here because after we got done recording this episode, Matthias and I realized we had yammered on just so long, almost an hour, and that's just way too much to put everybody through. So I'm here to say that we're going to go ahead and ease on out after this first part of property management. Just call this Property Management Part 1, talking about how they are important. Property managers are important before we get under contract on a property. And please tune in next week for Property Management Part 2, where we discuss all the ways in which they are vital to the operation after we have purchased and got it up and running under Capital Velocity Investments. As always, thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, heart, etc. And we would love to hear from anybody who's got any comments, feedback, or topics they would like us to discuss. As always, I'm the host of Get Invested Podcast, Jordan Stone, and we will talk to you next week.